On a July evening in 1924, a group of 5 miners were attacked by ape-like creatures in a remote gorge along the edge of the Plains of Abraham, located on the southeast shoulder of Mount St. Helens in Washington state. The miners, who were staying in a cabin in the area, reported hearing strange noises outside and saw a group of large, dark creatures approach the cabin. The creatures reportedly threw rocks at the cabin, prompting the miners to fire their rifles in self-defense. One of those miners, Fred Beck, wrote of the incident more than 50 years later in a book entitled "I Fought the Ape Men of Mount St. Helens." According to his book, it turns out that their experience had not been limited to just that night in July of 1924. Beck claimed that the group of men had been prospecting in the Mount St. Helens area for 6 years, and from time to time, they had come across large tracks near creek beds and springs during their travels.
The tracks were large, and we knew that no animal could have made them. The largest measured 19 inches long.
The mining group had received some encouraging news regarding their prospecting claim in the form of a good assay. An assay is an analysis to determine the presence or absence of a particular component. In this case, that component was gold. The group was enthusiastic, to say the least, to get to work mining their gold. Although they had all been hearing strange noises from the woods at night that week, they were not about to give up their claim. Fred Beck described what they had heard.
We heard a shrill, peculiar whistling each evening. We would hear it coming from one ridge, and then hear an answering whistling from another ridge. We also heard a sound which I could best describe as a booming, thumping sound, just like something was hitting itself on its chest.
The night in question, Beck and another miner, whom he refers to as Hank in his book, needed to replenish their water supply at the spring that was about 100 yards from the cabin. They both brought their rifles just to be safe.
Hank yelled and raised his rifle, and at that instant, I saw it. It was a hairy creature, and he was about 100 yards away, on the other side of the little canyon, standing by a pine tree. It dodged behind the tree and poked its head out from the side of the tree. At the same time, Hank shot. I could see the bark fly out of the tree from each of his 3 shots. Someone may have said that it was quite a distance to see bark fly, but I saw it. The creature I judged to have been about 7 feet tall, with blackish brown hair. It disappeared from our view for a short time, but then we saw it running fast and upright, about 200 yards down the little canyon. I shot 3 times before it disappeared from view.
Fred and Hank hurried back to the cabin and explained what had just transpired to the rest of the miners. And after a fairly brief conversation, and despite the good assay on their claim, they all agreed to leave the canyon at first light. The men felt that trying to pack and get safely to their vehicle and drive out of the canyon in total darkness would be a bad idea.
Nightfall found us in our pine log cabin. We had built the cabin ourselves and had made it very sturdy. It stood for years afterward and was visited by many sightseers until a few years ago when it was burned to the ground. The circumstances of the fire I do not recall. In the cabin, we had a long bunk bed. 2 could sleep feet to feet. The rest of us sleeping on pine boughs on the floor. And one end of the cabin, we had a fireplace fashioned out of rocks. There was no windows in the cabin, so darkness found all of us in the cabin more calm now. We were sitting around puffing on pipes and talking about the trip home the next day.
A welcome sleep finally came for the group of men. But it wouldn't last long. Fred Beck was awakened first by the sound of Hank screaming and kicking, but soon after, he heard tremendous thuds outside against the cabin walls. Something had hit the cabin wall so hard it caused the chinking to break loose from between the logs and rain down on top of Hank. The men were able to see through the hole left by the dislodged chinking. Giant ape men were throwing large rocks at the cabin while hooting and hollering and causing a great commotion. Rocks were hurled at the walls, the roof, and some even made it down the chimney. The holes in the chinking had become so large the men were able to shoot their rifles at their attackers through the newly formed gaps in the cabin walls. Fred and Hank decided to only shoot when the creatures, or mountain devils, as Hank had taken to calling them, were attacking the cabin. He told the rest of the party,
"Maybe if they saw we were only shooting when they attacked, they might realize we were only defending ourselves. We could have had clear shots at them through the opening left by the chicken had we chosen to shoot. We did shoot, however, when they climbed up on our roof. We shot round after round through the roof. We had to brace the huge locked door with a long pole taken from the bunk bed. The creatures were pushing against it, and the whole door vibrated from the impact. We responded by firing many more rounds through the door. It pushed against the walls of the cabin as if trying to push the cabin over, but this was pretty much an impossibility. As previously stated, the cabin was a sturdy-made building."
According to the men's account, the attack continued for the rest of the night, with only occasional short intervals of relative calm. At one point during the night, one of the mountain devils even shoved his arm between two logs of the cabin's walls. The men watched in horror as the creature was able to grab an axe that had been leaning up against the wall. They were only able to get the creature to let go of the axe by shooting at it. The attack ended just before sunrise, and as soon as they felt it was light enough to see, the men cautiously left the cabin. Standing less than 100 yards from the rattled group was one of the creatures. Fred Beck claims to have shot it 3 times, causing it to topple over the cliff and down into the gorge 400 feet below. The men ran to their vehicle without even bothering to pack up their equipment, leaving hundreds of dollars in mining supplies, which today would be worth thousands, behind. This was big news in the area and even made it to the front page of the Oregonian. And, as if this story wasn't wild enough, a local Native American tribe had their own ideas as to who perpetrated the attack on the miners. Jorg Totsgi of the Clallam tribe in Washington state claimed that the mountain devils were actually members of the Siouxtic tribe. According to Jorg, they were a skeleton in the northwestern Native Americans' closet. The Clallams, as well as other tribes in the area, never publicly divulged the existence of the Siouxtics, because the natives felt that the white man would never believe the stories surrounding the tribe. In his front-page Oregonian article, Totsgi wrote,
"Oregon and Washington Indians agree that the Siouxtic Indians are not less than 7 feet tall, and some have been seen that were fully 8 feet in height. They have hairy bodies like a bear. This is to protect them from the cold as they live entirely in the mountains. They kill their game entirely by hypnotism. They have great supernatural powers. And they also have the gift of ventriloquism and deceived many ordinary Indians by throwing their voices."
According to the tradition of the Pacific Coast natives, the Siouxtics did not evolve in quite the same way as other humanoids did through time. For reasons unknown, it was said that they were unable to absorb the Tamanoas, or soul power, and because of this, the tribe had become an anomaly of evolution. Totsgi concluded his coverage of the event by claiming that no search party would ever be able to find the Siouxtics. He and the Native Americans in the area all believed that the tribe as a whole had supernatural powers which they could use to disappear at will. After the events of July 1924, that section of the canyon became known as Ape Canyon. The Ape Canyon incident is one of the first and most well-documented cases of Bigfoot encounters. Could it be that all Sasquatch sightings in the area are really just brief glimpses of the lost Siouxtic tribe? Would this explanation also account for the sightings in California, Arkansas, Florida? What about other parts of the world? I'm not so sure, but I do believe that the truth is out there. In the description below, you'll find links to Fred Beck's book and articles written by Jorg Totsgi for the Oregonian. Thanks for watching this episode of Gettin' Spooky. If you enjoy this sort of thing, please like the video and leave a comment down below. If you have something spooky you think I should highlight here, then let me know. Until next time, be safe and get spooky.